Hey, Nick here with a quick note before you listen to this recording of the Weekly Sceptic live. It was a great show, I think, but there is a slight sound issue during one portion of the show. We lost the sound from the desk and we had to go to a backup recorder in the room. I know you guys are into sound quality, so am I, but I've listened to it and I think it is listenable and I think you'd rather have the content. That's the decision I've made. If you really hate it, you can just fast forward through that bit, but I thought it was worth including because it gets back to the good sound after this one portion where we lost it. So, and hey, if you want perfect sound, you should buy a ticket, right, guys? Anyway, hope you don't mind that too much and hope you enjoy the show. I'm fixing it on my day off, as always, while Toby is unreachable on holiday. But on that note, we are actually going to take a 2-week holiday from the Weekly Sceptic, our first ever holiday. It's also a holiday for me at GB News, my first ever one there, so I hope you don't mind. And we'll come back stronger with a better membership offer with new features. That is the plan in a couple of weeks. So we'll let you know about that. But for now, please enjoy this recording of the Weekly Sceptic Live. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Nick Dixon. All right, thank you very much. Welcome to the rally. It just feels a bit like that, didn't it, with that music? I got all pumped up. I remember it's just a podcast. How's everyone doing? You all right? Thanks so much for coming. This is the episode 98, so thanks for sticking with the podcast. And it's the 5th ever Weekly Sceptic Live. How's everyone doing? You all right? Yeah. Okay, it's not a bad energy. We didn't really promote it very much, especially me, but it was a decent turnout. Considering it's 28 degrees out, by the way, and that's the real temperature, not the one that they take on a fighter jet at Heathrow to prove that the climate change is real. Is the sound okay? Sound okay? Sounds kind of reverby from me. Well, okay, good. And so it's 28 degrees. Also, a lot of people are on holiday, to be fair, so you guys are just the hardcore Weekly Sceptic fans. Great people. The best people. I've got to be careful doing Trump up here because I feel a bit vulnerable on stage now. Do you know what I mean? With all the things that have happened in the world. But luckily, we've got our crack security team of diverse, non-binary midgets looking after me, so should be fine. They came straight from the Secret Service. So, yeah. So we are going to just do a few stories, and like we always do, a bit of Vance, a bit of serious stuff. We'll talk about, we were going to do a big ceremony, actually, a big opening thing, because that's like the thing that's happening at the moment. But we couldn't find enough people prepared to paint themselves blue and have their balls hanging out. So, unless Toby's got something planned I don't know about, but... So we were going to do a big Olympics thing, but actually we're just going to sit here and do a podcast, so it'll be that. The Olympics, we will talk about that, which was completely insane. We'll talk about the opening ceremony, and then we're going to cover a minor left-wing party that's having a leadership contest. Is it the Tories or something? Something like that. I can't remember, something like that. And we'll do that. We might have to do a bit of the grim stuff that's been happening with Manchester Airport and all these stabbings and things. We might have to do it because it is a topical podcast. We're going to make it too grim on a live show, but we'll probably talk about that. And then we might talk about Toby Robinson just to get ourselves cancelled because he's been arrested and then released on bail. Toby paid his bail, actually. That's not true. I just thought of that backstage. Like, that'll be funny. And Toby will be like, don't say that. So I did. So yeah, we might do that, and then we might do a little bit of US politics at the end, maybe talk about Kamala Harris, just so we can unburden ourselves from what has been and focus on what can be, and unburden ourselves from having to make sense or be smart. So yeah, we might do that, and then of course we'll do Peak Woke. Way. That one slow clap, yeah. And probably the bass department, and then you can come and have a drink on the roof, top bar, whatever, but only if you've paid, of course, because, we're capitalists here. It's the right wing, let's face it. And then, I wasn't going to say that, it sounded weird, but, and then what else? Oh, yeah, drinks, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, okay, that's pretty much the whole thing. So let's crack on and welcome the man that probably 30% of you have come to see. It is, of course, the legend, the free speech warrior, Mr. Toby Young. All right, Toby, this is always a bit where I think we should have planned some opening banter, and yet we never learn. So how are you doing?
Good, yeah, not bad.
Got any opening banter?
No opening banter, sorry. No.
Nothing. I bring all these jokes, and he just shows up, just as if his name alone is enough.
But just to underline, that was a joke about me playing Toby Robinson's Definitely didn't do that. Nor did the Free Speech Union.
No, but that is filmed and on record now, and I will be tweeting it. So yeah, that's not the case. Then people will say, "Why aren't you, Toby? Thought you were Mr. Free Speech Union." Anyway, so Toby, you've got your little laptop. You're all ready to go with the knowledge. Normally, Toby brings the boring knowledge, and I bring the lols, and that's like a good banter, a good sort of balance we've established.
I'm Ernie Wise to your Eric Morecambe.
Well, I didn't want to say, but yeah, okay. Well, let's crack on. Let's do the Olympics opening ceremony then. Did everyone see it? Yes. Okay.
Well, not all 4 hours, surely.
Who liked it? You liked it? Really? Do you know what this show is? Might be in the wrong venue. You didn't like the trans bit?
No.
What would?
I love Paris, so I like seeing Paris.
Okay, you might be in the wrong room. Because we all fucking hated it. I mean, no idea. Who hated it? See what I mean? You've outed yourself now.
I hated it so much it made me retrospectively reevaluate the Danny Boyle's opening ceremony for the London Olympics. I thought,
Toby's
actually, in contrast, that was actually quite good.
Toby's like, I'm rethinking my whole life choices. Yeah. Well, you just outed yourself. You're sort of like, I don't want to say like a black person at a Klan rally, but you know what I mean? Like, whatever I wouldn't use that analogy, but whatever the correct analogy is, you're the one person that liked it in a room full of. Anyway, maybe, hey, we need balance. This is an Ofcom regulated podcast. So it will be soon, yeah, if it's even allowed. Soon all podcasts will just be really balanced podcasts, like Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, with one like far right guy and one moderate lefty. So the Olympic ceremony. Sorry, I'm hearing a weird sound. Is that coming from you? That weird sound?
No, I can't hear anything weird.
There's a weird beeping. Can anyone hear it? Can we address that? No one's going to address it. I'm just pretending there's people here. Can we fix that, guys? Then nothing happens. Probably in my head. Anyway, so there was this blue guy, wasn't there? And there was someone's testicle was out.
And that was at the Last Supper tableau, wasn't it? That the testicle was showing. I think it was one of the disciples.
It was one of the disciples. What would his name be? I don't know. I need to think of this. But yeah, that was weird. Why did he have it? I mean, that is not for general consumption, is it? I mean, it's very niche that. You don't want to see that. And also, there was this big controversy. Were they doing the Last Supper or not? They obviously were. And even the actor, who was the woman or whatever she was at the front of it, said it was the Last Supper. Wasn't her Last Supper. See,
very good.
I don't even need to do jokes. We bring them.
Yeah.
You brought them. You brought your own.
It was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and St. Paul.
Yes, nice. Someone else called it what? The Ozempics was another one, because she was overweight. So you got it. So yeah, there was a lot of jokes, and she said it was the Last Supper on her Instagram, I think. So everyone's like, well, it was, but the official claim coming out was, oh no, it's a Dionysian celebration of Dionysian, blah, 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 blah. And they tried to get out of it being an insult to Christians, but no one really believed that. Did you believe that?
What was odd is that the artistic director Thomas Jolly emphasised at the beginning, and we were told, I think, by the two BBC presenters doing the voiceover, that it was supposed to be an inclusive opening ceremony, and the reason there were so many different people represented is because he wanted everyone to be represented in the opening ceremony, and everyone to feel included by what they were watching, but overlooked Christians, which was a slightly conspicuous oversight, given that Christianity is the largest religion in the world. I checked this beforehand. It is actually larger than Islam. So 2.4 billion people in the world identify as Christians, compared to 1.9 billion who identify as Muslim. And so to produce an opening ceremony in which everyone would feel represented and included, apart from the largest religion in the world, did seem a bit of an oversight.
Yeah, they don't tend to mean inclusion, do they? And many people speculated, would they do this with Islam? And the obvious answer was, lol, no.
Yeah, one of the defences of Jolly and others when asked about this was, well, that's what we do in France. We mock religion. And you're like, yeah, but you didn't mock Islam, did you? And that would have been electrifying had they actually done that in the opening ceremony.
Yeah, a bit of a very different show. Yeah, I mean, so basically, the whole thing opened with mocking the Last Supper, but the good thing is the closing ceremony is Jesus comes back and smites them all. So that's what I was hoping for. He just comes back and issues a great judgment upon them. That's my one hope, anyway.
Well, there was a power cut at the
Yes.
Paris Olympics, and the only the only thing you could see when all the power was cut was this kind of lit up kind of religious Catholic icon, because presumably it had their own generator.
Yeah.
And that was understood by many Christians around the world to be God smiting.
Yeah. And that's how I understand it as well. Absolutely. And I think France should have to apologise to all Christians and the world. There's just an official statement, but they've done sort of semi-apologies.
It was a Gallic kind of shrug style apology. It wasn't didn't seem very heartfelt. But they've removed it from the website, so they've kind of memory holed the opening ceremony. Now you can no longer see it on the official Olympic website.
They took down the YouTube as well, didn't they? Because it was so many negative comments. The YouTube video.
Yeah. I mean,
to me, Nick, the kind of question is, why did the Olympics opening ceremony include all these transgenders? And I don't know if you saw they kind of showed off various statues, and they were all statues of various feminist icons. So it was really almost like a competition to see who could have killed the most babies. That seemed to be kind of the gist of it. Yeah, they were all kind of people who advanced the cause of abortion. This is Marie Therese. She was an abortion activist in the 19th century. This is her granddaughter. She managed to get an abortion order. It was like not a single male. It was all just icons of kind of the feminist kind of French pro-abortion feminist movement. And that was kind of typical of the opening ceremony. When they say inclusion, as Nick says, they don't mean inclusion as we would normally understand it. What they mean is radical exclusion of anyone who doesn't subscribe to radical progressive ideology. And why is it that these kind of international events, whether it's Eurovision now or the Olympics, why do they have to why are they platforms to promote radical progressive ideology? Is it just because the kind of midwits involved, like the artistic director, like the choreographers, like the musical arrangers, are just all infected by the woke mind virus, so they cannot help, particularly they think it's avant-garde and shocking to include, a man painted blue with a beard, wearing a kind of loincloth. They think, let's shook the world with organic avant-garde, whatever. So is it just pure midwittery, or is there something more sinister going on? Is it that does it reflect a kind of an alliance between the kind of neoliberal, technocratic, managerial class and radical progressives? And if so, what underpins that alliance? That's what I'm puzzling over.
I can answer it all for you, luckily. So, number one, the guy called Thomas Joly, wasn't it? He's a gay guy. I don't know if that is relevant, but he's part of the LGBT thingy. Although lots of gay people hate the whole LGBT thingy, but he evidently doesn't. He did a very annoying interview. He was like, I sing through and all this kind of thing. I suddenly realised the only thing more annoying than a woke person is a French woke person. That is the ultimate.
It was called the wokeism.
The wokeism. And
we need what's French for free speech union? We need one in France.
Oh yeah, desperately. And so that guy obviously is part of the woke, so he's come up with it. So that's one answer. The other answer is that why attack Christianity and not any other religions? Well, one, it's a soft target, as we've established, but also that is their enemy because they're trying to deconstruct the West. Who is their enemy? It's Christian it's Christianity in the Western tradition. They don't care about Islam except as another useful tool to destroy the West. So they wouldn't attack it. They wouldn't attack it out of fear, but they also wouldn't attack any other religion. They wouldn't attack Hinduism. It wouldn't be relevant. They want to attack the core of the Western tradition. And so even though it's pretty much dead and they've won, they're still like, this is more like a victory lap. It's like which is appropriate for the Olympics. It's like, this is our winning victory lap. Look, I'm blue, my balls are out, and we're mocking Christianity. It's like a disgusting kind of head-on spike celebration of their decadent victory for Satan. Anyway, sorry if anyone walked into the wrong podcast. This is the evangelical Olympics.
I think that's part of it. But my answer to the question, well, why have the kind of technocratic managerial class allied themselves with these kind of mid-witted LGBTQ promoting artists and choreographers, etc.? And I think the answer is that they know that they're in the throes of a legitimacy crisis. Their legitimacy hitherto hinged on their supposed expertise. They were the people who should be in charge with their credentials and their extraordinary intelligence, their superior cognitive ability, their great education, because they can help us navigate these extraordinary conflicts and crises, and they completely screwed that up. So they messed up the global credit crunch, they messed up the war on terror, they messed up the pandemic. No one really believes that their expertise entitles them to rule anymore. So I think they've embraced wokery, they've embraced this new kind of secular theology, because now their argument is we're not just experts. You shouldn't just trust us because we know more. You should also trust us to be in charge because we are morally superior. We will look after the dispossessed, the oppressed, the historically marginalised and disadvantaged, and these new oppressed class, like transgenders. We are morally superior beings. We're the only people that can be trusted to safeguard the welfare of these sacralised minority identity groups. So in that sense, the reason for introducing all this kind of woke gobbledygook into the Last Supper tableau is because we are living in a kind of secular theocracy. They have essentially a moral theocratic reason for basing that's the basis of their legitimacy. It's not dissimilar from the Iranian regime. So France, I think, and Europe more widely, has become a kind of secularized version of Iran. The reason the ruling class are in power is because of their moral values. And so they wanted to, just as 200 years ago, there might have been a kind of a display of the Last Supper to emphasize their Christian piety. Today, they use the same iconography to advertise their woke piety, but it's essentially the same thing. What we have in Europe at the moment, I think, is a kind of secular theocratic regime. It's all about being a pious member of the woke church, and that's why I think we saw all this stuff in the Olympic opening ceremony.
I still think it's what I said. No, I just thought that'd be funny. I agree, but I don't think we're saying anything that different. I'm saying it in more colourful language, as is my wont, but I think it's the same thing, isn't it, really? That's the new religion that's supplanted the old one, and they're kind of luridly bragging about it.
Yeah, but that's part. I mean, I think where we part company is you think the reason for introducing this kind of these values into a tableau of the Last Supper was to mock Christianity, whereas I think there was something deeper going on. They're trying to hijack Christian iconography in order to advertise their own piety, and it's sort of the Tom Holland point that there is a continuity between Christianity and the new woke religion, that wokeism is a kind of hyper, unconstrained Christianity.
Yeah, I've always thought that's bollocks because it's just they're not the same thing. They're not the same thing. One of them's good, one of them's evil. I mean, that's a sign. But I mean, there's lots of ways you could use the iconography of Christianity in the sort of stories that work and that resonate with people in the way that Jordan Peterson always been talking about, without insulting it. And you could voice some of the archetypes or symbolism for your advantage. But you wouldn't have to sort of so crassly mock it. To me, it's a deliberate mocking of it. I mean, of course it is.
I think
it's like a drag show mocking it. That stuff was always meant to subvert norms and subvert morals.
But I think that, of course, there's a degree of mockery and a way of advertising how sophisticated and modern they are, postmodern. But there's also a way of trying to kind of a sort of vampiric effort to extract some of its power and transfer it to the new theocratic kind of high priests.
Yeah, maybe I could go for that to some degree. All right, but what about the response to it? I mean, people just had enough of this. Do you know who the boxer Ryan Garcia is? He's a young boxer. He's very talented, but he's gone a bit off piece lately. He just went mad on Twitter. He said F the woke culture, it's war, and then he said, so trans community, you can do whatever you want. Disrespect, show your penises out, and walk around like your S don't stink. But I fight back. And everyone is scared. F you, burn in hell, you woke up a different animal. So he wasn't thrilled. He wasn't thrilled with the Olympic opening ceremony. He wasn't really on board with you. You wouldn't have wanted to meet him that night. It was war. And then he simply posted, I hate trans people. So that was more. He said, I don't support the LGBTQ plus whatever the F at all. F you guys, rot in hell. There's a lot of tweets, and I'm just looking at some more. I mean, that my hatred for the LGBTQ plus community can be measured on the Richter scale. Unfollow me if you gay or trans or supporting that demonic cult. It went on at some time, there's way more. And he just said, like, I'm coding for all this. So now, obviously, that's an extreme example, but many people did respond badly, including Elon Musk, right?
Yes, so Elon Musk tweeted, Christianity has become toothless. And he also said that the Last Supper parody was extremely disrespectful to Christians. I mean, do you think that Christians should, that one way to defend traditional Christianity is for Christians to behave more like kind of fundamentalist Muslims and actually kind of react really aggressively to things like that and start burning down cities, rioting? Yes. You loved it.
Yeah. We've actually brought pitchforks, by the way. We're ready.
Really, a better solution would be some kind of reformation in the religion of peace, which made them more tolerant of mockery, rather than for us, for Christians to become kind of more trigger set, more sensitive.
Say that's not going to happen. I have to say that correct, aren't they? So we just have to get real and start the new crusades or whatever. Just kidding. I always think like the far staff are not on board with some of this. We need another room. I don't mind we need like a sports hall somewhere. But no, I'm just kidding. It's all banter. But I think in general Christians have to be tougher. And some of the some people that, to be fair, in France were saying we're sorry. This is not what France is about. We apologise. It's not like everyone is on board with it. Of course, it's just the liberal elite.
And Macron, during the opening ceremony,
he said, "This is France."
This is France.
Yeah.
And that's going to be used to beat him about their head. But
like a weird
Marine
shit
Le Pen
like,
and others in due course.
Yeah, it's like that. If that's France, like who would want to go? If that's someone's fun. So, all right, we've probably done enough on that. It's more than I thought we were going to do on that. Should we move on?
Yeah.
Happy? Okay. The audience is giving their say. That's good. That will help. Well, no, I don't know how to carry this whole thing again. All right, so let's do the. There's this little beep, and I'm going to ignore it. It's going on throughout the whole show. I'm completely insane, but I'll just ignore it. We'll edit that out. Let's go on and do the Tory leadership. So, all sorts of news. Suella Braverman, my favourite, of course, has dropped out. And she dropped out basically saying that she couldn't lead the Tories because they didn't want her, they didn't want her views. And that's really kind of a sad indictment of where the party is, IMHO, because her values are basically conservative values. So see if we can find, I know people love it when I read out my own tweet. So let's just see what she put here. This is actually just the Telegraph article, but I knew I tweeted it. So in the Telegraph she said, "We must provide a bold, authentic and compelling vision of hope to the law-abiding, common-sense, aspirational patriots. We are at our best when we offer them a full-throated defence of our country, meritocracy and fairness, when we don't allow our people to be worn down by smears of racism simply for waving our flag or wanting less migration, when we fight for their freedom to spend their hard-earned money before the government sucks it up, where we stand for the strength and sovereignty of the family unit and its corollary, home ownership, as the bedrock of society, when we eschew the luxury beliefs brigade and instead work for the well-being of the most deprived towns and communities, when we fight for our national sovereignty, culture and identity as if our civilization depends on it, and when we restore pride in our nation so that those brave souls who keep us safe at home and abroad are not demonized or prosecuted for every judgment made in the heat of conflict." Well, that wasn't wrong with any of that. So with those conservative views, you're not allowed in the Conservative Party. I mean, or you feel forced out. She had the nomination. The headline was, "I've been branded mad, bad and dangerous by my own party, so I will not lead it." Of course, the Economist don't write the headlines, but that is pretty much it. I mean, she was accused of having a public nervous breakdown. And she essentially said she couldn't lead it, given that she was a Conservative. What do you make of that, Toby?
Yeah, I sympathise with a lot of Suella's sentiments, but I'm not convinced that she actually did have. I mean, in order to be nominated in the first round, you need 10 MPs in total to sign your nomination papers. And she said, "I've got them, but I decided not to stand." And that, I'm not sure that rang true. That reminded me of, the unpopular boy at school claiming he does have a girlfriend, she goes to the other school. That's right. Really. I think the reason she's dropped out or isn't contesting the leadership is not because of her ideas so much as the manner in which she expresses them. I think her tone is just a bit too strident for the parliamentary Conservative Party, or for most of them anyway. I mean, even her closest ally in the party declared for Robert Jenrick a couple of weeks ago, which was Governor John Hayes, which surprised me. He's always been her mentor, and I think her tone has always been quite strident. Some people have described it as Trumpian. It's as though she's leaned into a more American style of politics, and that's what's alienated most of the parliamentary Conservative Party. And I think what will probably happen, and this looks as though it may happen quite soon, is that she'll end up crossing the House of Commons and joining Reform. Richard Tice has sort of made positive overtures towards her today. So I can see her joining the Reform contingent, becoming the 6th Reform MP of the House of Commons.
You say she's following an American-style Trump politics, but what are the bad things?
I think the
It would have been funny if I could have cut in, but you can't stop her when he's not
Sorry. I suppose within the Parliamentary Conservative Party, the feeling is that we don't just have to, in order to win again, we don't just have to appeal to Conservative voters who defected to Reform last time. We also have to appeal to those that defected to the Lib Dems and the Labour Party. And unless we can create a kind of broad church, then we're not going to win power again. We're not going to defeat Labour in 2029. And the other candidates have kind of, they kind of calibrated their pitch more to that. She was unequivocally kind of pitching to the Reform, the refugees that had gone to Reform. And I think the feeling is that in the Conservative Parliamentary Party, rightly or wrongly, that you need a broader pitch if you're going to win back the voters who left the party at the most recent election if you're going to get back into power.
Yeah, I mean, she said in the piece that she had diagnosed the problem as, that they didn't deal with the threat of reform. Yeah, there's two basic sides. One is you've got to gather all the reform voters, and the other one is you've got to basically become Labour. But she said we've got to deal with the threat from reform. She called it the existential threat posed by reform. She said Nigel Farage destroyed us. We have no hope of recovery until we win back the trust of the 4 million. But the key line was when she said there is, for good or ill, no point in someone like me running to lead the Tory party when most of the MPs disagree with my diagnosis and prescription. So that's the thing. So will they learn the lesson? This idea you've got to tack to the centre or whatever. I mean, Rees-Mogg was very dismissive about it, wasn't he? On the Spectator event, he said that's never how they've actually won. So I don't know. I don't really believe that's what they've got to do, but that's certainly what some people think. I'm just looking for the piece which said that reform won many people amongst the under 30s.
Yeah. So that was some polling indicated that reform actually did better amongst under 30s in the most recent election than the Conservative parties. So 8% of 18 to 30-year-olds voted Tory and 9.5% voted Reform. And to put that in context, 18% voted Green and the vast majority voted Labour. And in one respect, that's quite good news for Reform, that they beat the Tories in that demographic. But in another respect, it kind of gives the lie to Nigel Farage's claims that, there is something interesting happening amongst younger people, that Reform are striking a chord with younger people. Actually, in a previous election, UKIP, in 2015, in the 2015 general election, 9% of 18 to 30-year-olds voted for UKIP, and this time 9.5% of 18 to 30-year-olds who voted for Reform. So it doesn't seem like there's been much of a change there, in spite of their much more sophisticated, extensive social media operation and Nigel's supposed popularity with younger people.
Yeah, and my argument against that is, that was like the rise of UKIP, but in a culture, in a sort of post-Brexit world where the right are attacked on all fronts and it's virtually illegal to be conservative, for young people to start 9.5% in that environment, to me, is still significant. I mean, yes, the numbers similar, but to me, in the current environment, you're a young person and you still wrote Reform against sort of all the mainstream views and social ostracisation and so on. To me, that is still a significant number. I think Labour are going to be careful lowering the voting age, because you don't know if these people vote, of course. I don't think it's not clear that all these... This is the actual voters, right? But I've seen lots of these things that say that they love Farage on TikTok and they don't necessarily vote. But these are the actual voters, aren't they? So
these are the percentage of the people who actually voted.
Yeah, so that is significant.
I guess as you say, they might have had more support amongst Generation Alpha, I think that's called. So the current 18 to 30-year-olds, what are they? Zoomers. they're the generation that came after millennials.
Yeah.
So all my kids might
You're the greatest generation.
I'm both a baby boomer and Gen X. I'm the greatest generation.
I'm just kidding. You're boomer and an X.
Yeah, so there was an overlap. So there's like a Venn diagram there. There's a 1 year overlap, and I was born in that year.
So you like edgy films, but you own all the property.
Yeah. Anyway, so you're right though. I think Gen Alpha might be more right wing than Zoomers, and so it might be a mistake for Labour to lower the voting age to 16. Although they didn't include that in the King's Speech, so maybe they're on the second thoughts.
Okay. Well, the other big news, Suella is out, but the other big news, as we record today, Kemi has joined the race. Wonder who Toby's favourite is. That's one for the regular listener. Toby, of course, is going to be Team Kemi, and Kemi is the choice of the left Liberal, so it's not really surprising.
You're thinking
it's my side.
There are plenty of other choices for the left Liberals,
because,
like Tom Tugendhat and James Cleverly and Del Stride.
No, I'm not having a go, but all people like Graham Linehan, good guy, but he is pro-Kemi, and you think, oh yeah, he's a Liberal. Even Josh Harry on headlines on GBD is a lefty with massive Trump derangement syndrome, is pro-Kemi. I'm sure Andy Doyle is. So the kind of left Liberal side, you were sort of lost and, the left of randomly type people over things like the trans issue, they're voting Kemi. So, I mean, she's sold as this Conservative candidate. I'm not, maybe she is. I don't want to diss her too much. I'm sure she's very good. She's very smart. I'm sure she's going to work hard to put through good policies, and she had that funny thing sort of dissing Angela Rayner for 10 minutes in the House. Did you see that? It was kind of like listing all the reasons she won't be able to get anything done, and how hard it is in government. I respect all that. I was a little concerned when she had a go at David Tennant, even though he was being an absolute twat. But she said as a white male, I didn't get the impression she was totally parodying the left. To me, she was slightly falling back into identity politics, which I think she's capable of doing. And if you look at the roster, because I know you're too controversial, you look at the roster of the Conservative leadership candidates, there's only 2 white guys, and one of them's French. So, it's very like Cameron A-list, kind of like, he was obsessed with diversity, he wanted to get rid of white men from the party. So there is a kind of that element floating around in there, whatever you think of that. But she did say she's the child of Scruton and the soul, so she is a Conservative. There's that thing that came out trying to smear her, but actually she just looked quite good, where it was comments she'd made on a forum in the past.
Yeah.
It seemed to be from her. But they're all pretty cool comments.
Pretty good. Yeah.
So that didn't work. So the attacks on her haven't really worked. But I just wonder, and I'm sure she'll do a good job, but I just think, is she actually a Conservative or the kind of choice of the anti-woke Liberals? But the article was pretty good today. She laid out the things they had to do, and she was talking about renewal a lot. And she said her big thing was listening, that they need to listen to the members and make it about the members. And there is still going to be a vote for the members. People are still talking about getting rid of that. The last 2 bills that we voted for by the members, then presumably they'll get rid of the one they voted for in a coup. That tends to be how it works now. But she put out a pretty good piece. It's hard to read because there's light from her eyes, but it was basically, she said we have to listen more. She talked about Reagan when the Republicans were at their sort of nadir. He had this speech, a time for choosing, and she said it's a time for renewal. We need to listen, we need to actually do the things the people want us to do, basically. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I thought her piece setting out her platform in the Times today was really good. She talked about the party returning to its core principles of capitalism and the nation state. She said that she accused successive Conservative prime ministers of allowing Britain to become increasingly liberal and tolerating nasty identity politics. She said we talked right, yet governed left. Hard to disagree with that. I think her record for, as an anti-woke culture warrior is probably better than any of her rivals, given that Suella's not in the race. She attacked critical race theory. She stood up for gender critical feminists. I like the fact that when she takes on left-wing opponents, they try and take the moral high ground, and she takes the ground above them and kind of thunders at them from her kind of pulpit, and that is a very effective way, I think, of shutting up the left to kind of out moral high ground there, and she's very good at that. I think if the Conservative Party is going to reinvent itself and get voters to take another look in 5 years' time, without wanting to sound like an identitarian, if they elect a black woman, that will make people sit up and give the Tory party another look, I think, and they will think, crikey, the party has reinvented itself. And I think it would be, I think she's the candidate to beat. For my money, she's more likely to attract back those voters that defected this time in 5 years' time. And yeah, maybe she has kind of some centrist impulses. She needs her backbone stiffening, and maybe she needs to listen more to conservatives in the party who are going to furnish her with a kind of robust legislative program like Margaret Thatcher did when she became the leader in 75. But I think that's all entirely possible. So for my money, she's still the most attractive candidate. So I think second choice would be Robert Kenrick.
Well, I don't believe that being a black woman will particularly help, because you take like the normies in my football team and they just think Kemi's completely insane and far right. So it won't sway them. They'll just keep calling the Tories racist. And you say, what about Kemi? And they'll go, she's mental. And that's what they do. They just call Tory. I remember the last time this was happening, they were just calling all the Tory members racist. And I said, well, why did they want Kemi then? Because Kemi was the choice of the members before it ended up as choice. And then they just say, well, I don't know, then they're stopped basically. But I wonder if, like you said, they've never voted Tory, so yeah, maybe. I mean, my choice has dropped out, so I don't even know who I would prefer. This is where I always think I should have joined the party just so I can vote for the leader, but then they'd probably kick me out anyway. I seem to have kicked out loads of people lately. So I suppose, yeah, Kenrick, because he's quite serious about immigration now. He wasn't, but he got kind of red-pilled on immigration when he, I don't know, looked out the window. I mean, just keeping it real, but
not that I believe anyone will actually fix it, but I don't think anyone has what it takes to fix that problem. But we can get into that. But were you going to comment on something?
Well, I was going to say that for all Kemi's rhetoric about putting the nation state at the heart of the kind of new conservative offer and taking our sovereignty seriously and taking the problem of illegal immigration seriously, she didn't go as far as Kenrick and say she'd be prepared to leave the European Convention of Human Rights by repealing the Human Rights Act. I mean, and I think that's going to be the kind of dividing line between them. But I think all the candidates will be asked that. It's a bit like asking Labour candidates whether, what is a woman? That's going to be the kind of killer question for the Conservative candidates. Would you leave the ECHR? And just as a sidebar, I think the difficulty, I mean, I'm in favour of leaving the ECHR and repealing the Human Rights Act and replacing it with our own Bill of Rights. But I think the political difficulty of that is that the left will say Tony Blair promised Sinn Féin and IRA sympathisers that their human rights would be guaranteed if they signed the Good Friday Agreement, because they wouldn't be relying on the British state as the guarantor of their human rights, because he was going to pass the Human Rights Act, and they could rely on the European Court of Human Rights as the ultimate guarantor of their human rights, and that apparently brought them over the line. So the argument will be, if you repeal the Human Rights Act, come out of the ECHR, that will jeopardise the Good Friday Agreement, jeopardise peace in Northern Ireland, and that'll be a powerful argument.
Okay. That will be the key question. Incredibly, it's the new Brexit, because it's now leave is just, would you leave the ECHR? So leave and remain are back. And they're never going to leave us. They're just going to keep changing the terms. So that is the new thing. Because you've got the right of the party, like, yes, I'll definitely leave the ECHR. Then you've got the wets who won't. So that's the same. It's the same split that it always was, except now it's about the ECHR. And Tugendhat said he would, which was sort of surprising, because he's sort of as a one nation wet. But then he said he would leave it. But then on the BBC Today programme, he would was kind of wet on it and suggested, and it sounded like he wouldn't. And of course, do you really believe he would?
Yeah.
I mean, no, they don't believe it. I don't believe it.
And Tugendhat's campaign hasn't impressed so far. So there was that. But in addition,
can I read the headline?
Go on then.
Yeah, there was it, because I know what you're going to say. There was a headline in the Daily Mail. It's Tom Tugendhat. Tory leadership hopeful Tugendhat forced to change his campaign slogan after it was discovered to spell turd. TURD. Is that what you were going to say?
Yeah, so his campaign slogan was, together we can unite the party, rebuild trust, defeat Labour. And it was a list, and it was TURD. That was his campaign slogan. He laid a turd.
And then it was a very last-minute swift rewrite, because it was like it was listed in vertical, and suddenly the last one, instead of defeat Labour, goes win back the country, and it's much longer. It's like they barely fit it on the end. Like they started trying to write happy birthday and fallen off the end or whatever. So it looks completely different and it stands out. But yeah, turd wasn't great. But he could. There's going to be there's always a sleeper candidate, a dark horse, right? And it's going to either be Cleverly or Tugendhat, right? Who suddenly do better than you think, because the other ones are all. Kemi's a favourite, which is never good in the Tory race. You've got Priti Patel, who I'm keep forgetting is in there, so I'm not sure she's going to do that well. I could be wrong. Yeah, we mentioned Jenrick, but he's already thought to be this sort of quiet, semi-favourite. So is there another sleeper candidate, or is he the sleeper candidate? I don't know. Or maybe that my sleeper candidate theory is just wrong. But Cleverly could do better than you think, because he didn't even want to run, but everyone kept telling him he should. That's what he claimed.
Yeah, but they all say that.
They all say it, yeah. So he might not do well at all. But he might do better than you think. The real banter candidate is Mel Stride, who I keep forgetting is in there. That's like, he's obviously not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's probably Jenrick versus Kemi, you think.
The Conservative leadership race is often quite unpredictable, and the Parliamentary Conservative Party is, as the cliche goes, the most sophisticated electorate in the world. And of course, they're all thinking about it's not just about whether a candidate shares their political values. It's not just about whether they're the left-wing candidate or the right-wing candidate. It's also about which candidate they think is most likely to win, because then if they back them early or come into their fold, then they can cash that in later and get a ministerial or cabinet appointment, etc. And so I don't rule out the possibility that the final two. So the way the contest is going to work is that there are going to be 2 votes in September. So they whittle the field of 6 down to 4, and then the 4 will then be given prominent speaking slots at the Conservative Party conference, and there'll be lots of hustings, and they'll be doing lots of meeting and greeting and handshaking and the rest of it, and then there'll be two more elections to whittle it down to the final 2, and then it'll go to the party membership. So everyone thinks that there'll be a left-wing candidate and a right-wing candidate, and the right-wing candidate will probably be Kemi, and the left-wing candidate will be Tom Tugendhat, James Cleverly, or Mel Stride. But I wouldn't rule out the possibility that the final 2 are Kemi and Robert Jenrick, just because people think they're more capable of winning than any of the others.
I agree with that. Is that pretty much done, Toby? Anything else on that?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, let's move on and I think we've got to talk about this Manchester airport incident, which I don't think we covered. It's pretty grim for a live show, but we do have to do it. So, of course, I'm sure you all saw it. There was a police officer kicking the guy in the head in Manchester airport. Everyone freaks out, going, "Oh, it's terrible." And I wasn't so sure, because we already knew that he had allegedly punched a female officer and broken her nose. And I didn't understand why that wasn't being talked about more when everyone was saying, "Oh, it's so terrible that we kicked this guy." I'm not saying it's ideal to kick a guy when he's down, but I'm also saying he was obviously in a highly stressful situation. Other officers are being attacked, and he's reacted. These people are attacking them. You're in a physical fight. You're hardly going to get it perfect every time. And whose side are we really on? And I noticed that people like Paul Waugh, MP, were supporting. He seemed to be very much, in my opinion, siding with the criminals. He said, my statement on the appalling footage from Manchester Airport, the video footage of a Greater Manchester police officer kicking and stamping on a man in Manchester Airport is truly shocking and disturbing. Like many who've seen this clip, I am extremely concerned. I've had it confirmed that the man arrested is a Rochdale resident. I hope to meet the family as soon as possible. I've expressed my concerns directly to the Assistant Chief Constable, etc. It's right that the police officer concerned has been removed from duties. And he goes on and says things like that. To me, it's the immediate, I might say, left-wing impulse to defend criminals as the oppressed. It's another day of anarcho-tyranny in the UK, if I might put it that way. It's immediately supporting the criminals. Well, this guy punched a female officer. And then another video comes out, lo and behold, and now Paul Waugh MP is trying to dial it back slightly today, because lo and behold, yeah, funny that, isn't it? After the full video comes out of a guy beating up everyone, punching female officers, and now everyone's going, oh, maybe we got this wrong. But I always thought we got it wrong from the start, and I've been basically vindicated. But what do you think, Toby?
I think it was. It's quite helpful that the video seemed to drop in 2 stages. So you had the first video drop, which just showed the police officer kicking someone who was already on the ground, seemingly had been tasered, in the head, and then stamping on his head, and that looked quite bad. And there was a lot of agitation and rabble-rousing around that, and it looked as though there might be civil disorder breaking out in parts of Manchester. But then, a couple of days later, the second video dropped, and it put it in context. And that really kind of meant that the kind of protest movement forming up around this victim and portraying him as the kind of British George Floyd just fizzled out, because had the video in its totality been shown first, then it might have, I think, had a more lasting impact, with people discounting the kind of run-up to what had happened. But the fact that people got all excited and a lot of people kind of, condemned the police, and the police made various apologetic noises, suspended the officer, placed him under investigation, and then the context was made clear. I think that was quite helpful from the point of view of preventing this guy being turned into a kind of martyr. He's lucky, in fact, that he's not in America, and this isn't America, because in America, if he'd had attacked, 2 police officers, including breaking the nose of a female police officer, he would have been shot dead.
Yeah.
In our country, he was tasered. Actually, it testifies, I think, to the restraint shown by our police officers rather than their brutality.
Yeah, and notice Paul Ward's statement, MP for Rochdale, Labour MP, of course, today says, "When I met the Assistant Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police last Thursday, I made it very clear that any perpetrator of criminal attacks on our police should face the full force of the law." This sounds different to the first one. I'm just a layman, but he goes on, the force had reported that their officers had been subjected to a violent assault while trying to make an arrest at Manchester Airport, and that the officer had been left with a broken nose. I passed on my concerns for the female police officer. It's a completely opposite statement. It's so shocking. Absolute weasel. And Richard Tice accused him of rapid arse covering or something, and that's what that is. And they're like, now, it's too little too late. It's absolutely pathetic. They instinctively side with, partly because they're their voters as well, but it's a voting-based question, but it's also just siding always with the criminal. We're not getting into George Floyd, I'll get myself in even more trouble, but, everyone is, even the Telegraph, and everyone still lists it as a definite murder, even though there's not conclusive evidence for that. There's a lot of evidence forensically that it was the overdose, but we don't even want to go there. But anyway, this was very controversial, because lots of people, even on the right, even the sort of Lawrence Fox type people, are saying, hey, we can't treat people like this as police brutality. Whereas some people, and I'm more on this side if I'm honest, are just saying the police have to do their job. What we want from the police is to stop woke stuff, stop 2-tier policing, and do policing again, and do it in a tough way. This is what they have to do. And therefore we have to give them a bit of leeway if they, I don't want to say kick a guy in the head, but if they go a bit too far after they've just seen a female officer punched in the nose, I can live with that more than I can live with going too far the other way. Obviously, that's my view, but I just think we're too soft about it, because we're just not in an ideal world anymore. We're in a world where, with the police, they can barely do their job anymore. When they actually do it properly, even if they get a bit overzealous, I'm more on that side. But then people say it can be done to you. But I think it's already being done to Conservatives and people on the right all the time at marches. So, but what do you think, Toby?
Well, I think, I think that if you look at the whole video, it does look as though he'd been tasered, and that's why he fell to the ground before he was kicked in the head and then stamped on by the officer. And you was
he definitely stamped on?
Yeah, there was a stamp, and maybe Stamp's putting it too hyperbolically.
I've seen Roy Keane do worse. No, I'm sure it was bad. I shouldn't joke. It's a live show.
I think hard to defend that. But maybe he was overcome with emotion because he'd just seen a colleague punched in the face and put on the ground.
Someone pointed out he had his hands were full, and he didn't have any other method of detaining the guy. I don't know. Did he have a taser in his hands, or did he? I'd have to watch it again. But
I think like you, I would prefer the police to use excessive force than to use excessive restraint when dealing with situations like that.
Okay.
And there's been many horrible events. I mean, remember, there was already the stabbing in Kent, so tensions are high. Today there's another horrific stabbing. We don't know. It's hard to talk about it because it's breaking, and obviously it's meant to be a entertaining show. So, and it's also a horrific story that's breaking, so we don't want to go into it too much. But the culture we have now, you've got to wait and see who the perpetrators are, but it's getting very, very nasty, isn't it? I mean, my point is, if the police don't step in and do their job, even if they're rough, it's going to get much worse when if people take it into their own hands.
Yes, I think, and we saw that in Leeds with the outbreak of civil disorder in Leeds a couple of weeks ago. The police just essentially abandoned the area and didn't go in for seemingly. I mean, after they fled the scene, they didn't go back to try and restore order for something like 24 hours. It reminded me. I remember during the riots in London in 2011. They got closer and closer to where I live in Acton, and I remember going to visit Ealing Broadway, where the riots had engulfed the night before, and walking back home from Ealing Broadway to my house, walking down a residential street much like my own, and there was a man sitting on his doorstep, and his front window had kind of plywood instead of glass, and I asked him what had happened, and he said the night before a rioting mob had come down his street, and they were setting cars alight and breaking into people's houses and stealing their possessions and breaking their possessions, and he had locked his wife and child in the shed in the garden, and then tried to defend his property, and they had broken the main window of his front living room to try to get in through that window, and he'd stopped them getting in through the front door, and he managed to fight them off. And I said, "Didn't you call the police?" He said, "Yeah, I called the police. I called the police within 30 seconds of the mob arriving." And I said, "And when did they turn up?" And he said, "They still haven't turned up." And this was more than 12 hours later. And I then went back to my street, and through the local neighbourhood watch group, we organised to we said, if it happens again, if the mob comes down our street, if the riots affect us, we won't do anything if they set our cars on fire. But if they try and break into any of our houses, set off the burglar alarm, and we'll all come to the aid of whoever is being attacked. That was our plan, and it didn't happen. The riots were snuffed out that day. They ended at that point. But it made me think how close we are to a complete breakdown in order. I mean, that's how far we got in organising ourselves, knowing that we couldn't depend on the police, or fearing we couldn't depend on the police. A week later, we would have been an armed militia had the police not done anything to intervene. And that's how close we are to, a breakdown of civilization.
I know. I watched The Dark Knight Rises again last night, and it's getting very close to Bane just coming up and say, "We the people." It's very close to that. It's horrific. That's why I say I should have just made my point much quicker. Which I eventually said, if the police don't deal with it, other people will. Go on.
I was going to say, can you do an impression of Bane?
I don't know if I've got a great one. What was he saying? "Oh, you think darkness is your friend? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it." Has anyone seen that film? Does that just sound insane if you haven't?
Born in the dark.
Yeah, it's not bad. Bane was a leftist, if you look at it, wasn't he? He was at least pretending to be, to get the people on board. He was like, "We the people." You've just broken a guy's neck and blown up a football stadium. Why are they going to listen to you? But they do. Because he's.
No, I mean, it's a great film. I mean, it's actually
it's great, it's the best of the Dark Knight trilogy. People say, "Oh no, it's the second one." They're idiots.
No, I agree. Best one, and you can't deny that it's got a conservative message. Sometimes when conservatives try and find conservative messages in films, you kind of, scratch your chin a little bit. But this one, I mean, the hero is a billionaire capitalist who sells arms, and the villain is a kind of 1% anti-Wall Street protester. I mean, it couldn't be clearer.
Yeah, and there's even more than that. No, I don't want to give spoilers away, but there is a point. Bruce, the ultimate antidote to leftism is seen as Bruce Wayne donating Wayne Manor to orphans, which is philanthropy, which is the right-wing alternative.
Yeah, it's basically Elon Musk versus George Monbiot.
Yeah.
Whose side are you on? Not difficult.
There's even a moment where Catwoman, last point on Dark Knight Rises, where Catwoman, she's just looking at a destroyed house because there's been this anarchistic revolution, and she looks at it, or left-wing revolution, and she looks at the photo and says, this was someone's home, and a friend says, you wanted this, didn't you? And she realizes it's wrong. It's the family unit that matters, not her bullshit, garbage leftist revolution. Very right-wing film. And of course the fact that Batman's like a vigilante, obviously being the main thing. You know, vigilantes tend to be on the right. If you've noticed, Rorschach, Batman, Taxi Driver, that guy.
Dirty
All
Harry.
my heroes. What?
Dirty Harry. Yeah.
Dirty Harry, exactly. Just a maverick doing things his own way, with a massive gun and
Gotta ask yourself
and bigoted
if you feel
attitude.
lucky.
And that was just Clint playing himself. I love Clint films. Clint films show you... Anyway, don't have time, but you can do a conservative theme film without it being explicit. Anyway, a bit of light-hearted fun at the end of that very grim story. This could be... Oh, the one thing I meant to say, but I've dropped it now. The one thing I meant to say was that Andy Burnham talked about the Manchester airport. He said, don't use the Manchester airport incident for political purposes. I mean, it's a policeman kicking a Muslim who's just punched a female police officer. It's about the most political event possible. Do you know what I mean? Better not use this to create any tensions. Like, a bit late for that, Andy. I mean, it's about as political, as it could possibly get without it being an actual party political broadcast. Toby, we don't want Thor to be annoyed about not getting his ad in, and so I might go and...
Okay.
Because the next story is quite complicated and it could take ages. So I'm going to go for my costume change, like Mariah Carey.
Tommy
And
Robinson
then,
next.
and then Tommy next. But he's got to do our advert. I always think Mike might just dub in the advert later, but he likes to do it live. So anyway, one sec. Toby's going to do the advert.
Okay, I'll do the ad. This is an ad from our loyal sponsor, Thor. Please feel free to go to the bar. Nick's... he's quite an elderly 40-year-old, so he might be some time in the bathroom. But I'll read Thor's ad. So this is Thor speaking. I'd love to connect with you, my fellow skeptics, and yet at the time of writing, while 192,000 people had read my recent LinkedIn post titled, "Why don't you buy a Tesla for the tax break, Thor?" only 421 people have left a comment. That's a bit of a humble brag, isn't it? Only 421 had commented on Thor's LinkedIn post. Anyway, sadly for me, Thor says, you, my dear fellow skeptic, you haven't connected with me on LinkedIn yet. What gives? The most consistent feedback I get is that my LinkedIn content, written or video, is 100% authentic and a highlight of their LinkedIn feed. Nothing to sell, but everything to give. And I'll give you my all pretty much every day on LinkedIn, my dear skeptic. So please contact with me there on linkedin.com/in/ThorHolt. Don't just hit follow, hit connect, and tell me you found me through the Weekly Sceptic, because I want to have a reason to keep supporting this show. See you there, linkedin.com/in/ThorHolt. See you there after the show, and remember, be a connector, not a follower.
So we've got to do Tommy Robinson. So there was the march. I'm sure many of you know there was a Patriot March, whatever you want to call it. Quite a big march, and mainly it seemed to go off pretty peacefully. Of course, the media tried to smear people. They said Met Police arrest 2 men for GBH as protests turned violent, and they said there's Islamophobic chants fill the air. That's the Mail. People tell me you're a right-wing paper, but they're not, because the journalists are not. But so there was this march, mainly went off fine, but then Toby Robinson was arrested. It's a bit complicated. He was arrested, so he showed this film which he wasn't supposed to show, and then they got him trying to leave the country, and there's this thing called Schedule 7 as part of the Terrorism Act, or whatever it's called. And with Schedule 7, you're allowed to stop someone at a port of entry, whether it's an airport or a ferry port, and you can ask them to see their phone or anything about their person, and you can go into their phone, and if they say no, they have committed a crime under the Terrorist Act. So you can essentially say they're terrorists because they won't show you their phone. And they knew that Tommy Robinson wouldn't show his phone. They detained him till 10 p.m. in a cell. Then he was released on bail. Toby was kind enough to pay it. And then then he didn't really. And then he left the country. And I know he was, because I listened to a phone call he made from prison. He wanted to go on holiday with his kids, so he left the country. The problem with that was they were trying to detain him because he had a contempt of court hearing today, which is about this libel of a Syrian person in this film that he wasn't supposed to be showing, but he did then show it anyway. So it's all a bit complicated on the detail, but it's a big story because people are saying, you've arrested Tommy and it's, the establishment's against him and all this sort of thing. What was your take, Toby?
Yeah, so the Free Speech Union is always kind of asked, particularly on X, whenever Tommy Robinson gets into trouble for one thing or another, why aren't you defending Tommy Robinson? And so I have been thinking about whether any of this cluster of issues that he's been embroiled in are free speech issues that the FSU should take up. And I think one of the issues which you mentioned, Nick, is that in this film he's made, Silenced, which he showed at the march on Saturday I think in Trafalgar Square on a big screen, he described a Syrian refugee who was involved in an incident at a school in West Yorkshire in 2018. He said of this boy, probably a man now, that he beat a girl black and blue.
All right, that is the end of the free podcast for this week. But don't worry, there's still loads more podcasts. If you go to basedmedia.org and sign up for just £5 a month, that's the price of a pint in London or a posh coffee with loads of soy that you don't need. So basedmedia.org for the whole podcast, and you get Peak Woke, Base Department, all these great sections, and you help us keep going, pay all our staff, keep the lights on, keep this brilliant production going at basedmedia.org, and it's just £5. Thank you very much for the support, and we'll see you there.